there are things that are preventing the recovery. One is, you know, I'm gonna say it. Becky's gonna cringe. The mark-to-market debate that's going on, and it's really not mark-to-market. It's what you do with that fair value. How much should banks get charged if an asset is impaired? Should they write it down to whatever the cash value is or whatever its intrinsic value is? So yesterday there was a great story in the Journal. Holman Jenkins wrote a nice story about why don't we try that? It's free, and let's see what happens. You know, the banks are going down and down and down. We're pouring money into the top of the capital system, and it's getting drained out by regulatory fiat. So why don't we give it a try and see what happens? Because the banks certainly are, the trajectory right now isn't good, so let's try something that's free. It
is free, but it is a complete change of the rules at a time where people are craving consistency over a lot of other things.
And doesn't it put off the idea that you would have private capital that would actually step in and feel comfortable with things to that point? We had Oren Kramer here yesterday, along with our guest host, who was very smart about this. He said, you know, he would buy at this point, but you're not going to buy if you don't know what's really in there and if people don't mark this stuff down. How do you get more private capital in?
Great point. I think financial institutions, it's not just banks, too, it's insurance companies and it's long-term asset holders. If you just disclose, this is what the market had paid for me, this is the price, and this is Santulli's point, the price is the price, no disagreement. But a bond has inherent value. You get principal and interest, like a mortgage bond. You get principal and interest. That's a lot of the value, inherent value in that asset. Say, this is what the price is, this is what we think the inherent value is, we're marking it to X. Fully disclose it. And if it's fully disclosed, investors can decide if that's a reasonable price, and then over time, the investors will decide whether you're being reasonable about your expectations of that price. So we'll let the market decide whether you're good or bad on your pricing, but what it will arrest is the perpetual markdown of assets that all financial institutions are taking. We have to arrest that. We have to stop the decline before we get a recovery. So I'm for full disclosure. I'm for fair value. I think fair value is important. We know what the price of stuff is, but to force institutions to write it immediately off capital, how much the market discount is because there's no liquidity.
Does that work on the way up, too, though? If prices are rising very steadily?
It did.
You don't get to count them for whatever you think they're worth at that point? You don't get to mark it up to your bottom line?
This is part of the reason we're in this problem is it's pro-cyclical. It exaggerated a lot of the prices in 06 and 07, or 05, 06, and 07. So we're seeing the bottom side of this. Obviously, everybody knows assets were overpriced. You know, we had a bubble. Now, using the same system, you have to agree that we're probably underpriced using the same system. So it exaggerates on both ends. I think if you just fully disclose it, let the investors decide whether or not your mark is good or bad instead of imposing a markdown due to a lack of liquidity.